Okey-doke. Hello and welcome to Bulimia Sucks. I'm your host, Kate Hudson Hall, and thank you so much for listening. Now, this is a platform for people to share relatable and uplifting and inspiring conversations based on bulimia, anorexia, and all of the other eating disorders. And episodes include talking with people who are struggling now with their eating disorder and sharing their personal stories and their difficult journeys and their steps taken into their recovery. And then also to people who have overcome an eating disorder. And then we're talking to professionals who work with people with eating disorders who may have had their own struggles around an eating disorder, around food. So there's quite a variety of people that we talk to. So I'd just like to mention my audiobook is out there on Audible and Amazon and iTunes. So if you'll be interested and would like a free copy of the Bulimia Sucks audiobook, then I can send you the code. So if you email me, katehudsonhall@gmail.com, and I'll send you the code. So then you can download it for free. And the other thing I've been working on is my anxiety book. So it's got a number of different tools and techniques and tips in there to help people to start to break their patterns of anxiety. So I'm very excited about this. And I am thinking about calling it Anxiety Hacks. So watch this space. Let's see what happens. So it's very exciting. Now, our guest today, our fabulous guest today, is Debbie Saroufim. Debbie is a body relation. I'm just checking to say
that is correct. Saroufim, yes, you got it.
Oh, good. Oh, good. Debbie is a body relationship community group coach, struggling for years with her own eating disorder. She now helps women make peace with their bodies, food, and exercise, and build up their immunity to diet culture. Debbie does both one-to-one coaching, and she also offers a private membership where you'll be able to connect with other women of all different shapes and sizes, all who have been impacted by diet culture, which so many of us have. Debbie, oh my gosh, thank you so much for joining us. This is such an important area to talk about.
Thank you so much for having me. I mean, I mean, we're swimming in diet culture. Yeah. So you don't get out of the pool without being a little bit wet. Like you just can't. So I think it impacts people who are struggling, and I think it impacts people who aren't struggling. I don't think diet culture really discriminates in that way.
Yeah, absolutely. So should we start by, if you would like to share your journey with your eating disorder?
Yeah. Well, so I was raised by a mom who is 72, and she still has an eating disorder. She raised me with an eating disorder. So I was put on my first diet at the age of 6. And it was a preventative diet so that I would not have to undergo the struggles that my mom had to undergo. At least that's how it was sort of phrased. So that at the age of 6, I totally knew that there were good bodies and there were bad bodies, and there were good foods and there were bad foods. And if you didn't have one of the good bodies, you should be doing everything in your power to have a good body. So that by the time I was in high school, I had my own eating disorder. I didn't really know I had an eating disorder until I was at summer camp, and someone there was bulimic, and I was in the cabin of the girl who was bulimic, and I was the girl who had dropped a bunch of weight. So I got the intervention circle where they were like, "We know what you're doing," and I remember just crying and being exhausted, and then this is one of those messed up diseases where then they were like, "Okay, so you're going to have to stop throwing up." And I was like, "Oh, I'm not throwing up. That's not me. Oh, okay, I'm fine." It was like, how I think I tricked myself into not believing I had an eating disorder for a really long time, because I think that we have these ideas of what an eating disorder looks like, right? Like we believe when we have an eating disorder, we believe, well, if I was good at having an eating disorder, if my eating disorder was really, really dangerous, I'd be thinner, or I'd be this, or I'd be that, or I'm okay because I'm not throwing up, or I'm starving myself, but when I eat, like there's so many ways you can kind of manipulate the brain. But my parents got the call from summer camp that even though I wasn't the one throwing up, I did have an eating disorder. So when I got home, they got me into therapy and I started working with a dietitian. Right. And I got rid of the behaviors, right? Like I was no longer starving myself. But I hated my body, and every bite of food that I took was like this massive guilt trip of, is this worth it? What is this going to do? And then I came out to Los Angeles to be an actress in college. My eating disorder still there, still working through it, but again, no longer in the danger zone, if you will, with some of the.
So you were still having therapy?
I was still, I think I have been in therapy since I'm 42, and I've been in therapy since probably like 14, 15 years old. And so, yeah, I'm at a point where I consider myself to be, recovered. And obviously I help other women now, and I have no intention of getting out of therapy. I think therapy is sort of what helps me there. So I came out to Los Angeles to be an actress, which is a pretty messed up world of diet culture anyway. I got a call from my agent at one time saying, "Are you sitting down?" I said, "Oh no, what's wrong?" She said, "Well, I'm having a hard time with you because you're not really pretty enough to be the pretty girl. So I can't submit you for those roles, but I don't want you to gain 100 pounds and play her best friend. So I think you should get your nose done." And the most messed up part of it is that I got my nose done and I started going on auditions. Like it's just reinforced. It's reinforced, perpetually reinforced. But I was not a successful actress, even though my nose was now snipped and I was going out. I was not booking. And so I became a personal trainer to pay the bills while I was going out auditioning. And that's sort of where I had that final shift, because I had women of all different sizes and shapes come to me, some in bodies that I really coveted, and they were asking me to fix something about themselves. And I kept thinking like, well, when are they going to notice that my abs don't look right? Or like my arm doesn't do that. And that's when I had that realization that the way I felt about my body wasn't a symptom of my body being wrong. It was a symptom of a much bigger problem that doesn't have anything to do with me, right? It was all of a sudden I was like, oh, wow, she's not allowed to feel good either. And she's not allowed to feel good. And she's not allowed to feel good. Maybe we're just not allowed to feel good. Like maybe that's the problem, is we're not allowed to feel good. And culturally, we're sort of taught, if you have a good, air quote, good body, you'll feel good in it, and nobody feels good in it. So they all keep trying to change the body. Maybe what we need to be changing is the culture. So that's when I took a step back, because I didn't know how I could I loved exercise and all of that, but I didn't know how I could be a personal trainer without propelling the myth that you should work out to make your body look a certain way. And now I'm a body relationship coach. I help people make peace with their body. I think that not liking the way it looks is not a symptom of it looking wrong. I think we don't have a real culture that allows you to like the way it looks, to like the way your body looks. I also think you can love your body even if you don't like it all the time. And so my job is to help you make peace with the parts that might still disappoint you, because I'm this far into recovery. I can say I genuinely love my body. I don't hide parts of it anymore. And here's the messed up part. Guess what? This far in, there's still a part of me that, like, if I got to say, I'd be thinner. And that, again, now I know, wow, that feeling, that's not because my body's wrong. That's just me feeling diet culture all around. So I'm allowed to sit with that feeling
Right.
and not act on it. But
Yeah.
but I think it's tough because, like I said, this far in, there's still that little voice in the back of my head that's like, but wouldn't life be so sweet if you were just 10 pounds thinner?
Right.
And now I know the answer is no, like it wouldn't. I would still feel this way. But now I know that's not a reflection on me.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
So when somebody comes to see you, and for help with their, recovery, addressing how they feel about their body, how do you take them through that? I know everybody's different.
Yeah, no, everybody is different.
Yeah.
But I do sort of have, I do have a method. What I teach you to do is, I think a lot of the thoughts that we have, that we don't even, I say thoughts, but the thoughts that go through that we don't even think about, right? Some of these thoughts are on autopilot, and a lot of them are influenced by diet culture. So what I do is I teach you specific tools so that you can start to have a conversation with that diet culture voice in your brain. Because I still hear, that voice sometimes say, if I'm at a buffet and I want to take a bigger spoonful, I still hear that voice say, oh, you shouldn't. And now, instead of just sort of that voice blending into the background because I take it for granted and I abide by it, now I get to say, okay, but like, why shouldn't I? And I get to have an actual conversation. And I think that, recovery and being in recovery doesn't mean you always feel comfortable with the amount of food that you're eating, but it does mean you always know that not feeling comfortable doesn't mean you're eating the wrong amount, right? So, I'm allowed to have the thought of, man, that I ate too much food, without it meaning I ate too much food. Right. And again, we've been
allowing that thought just to pass through.
Mm-hmm. And to just be like, oh, there's that thought again. That's a bummer. So I usually do it by, I start with learning to have a conversation with ourselves around food, because I think, whether you have an eating disorder or just disordered eating, we all have to eat. And this way of listening to the culture and taking it for granted really comes through with some of our food behaviors. But then we start to explore the same voice that we have around those shoulds and shouldn'ts with food, around exercise, around movement. I had one woman swear to me that she was just lazy. She was lazy and she doesn't work out at all. And she believed this because she was in a bigger body. And I did not believe that she was lazy, but she told me she didn't work out at all. And I was like, okay, well, what kind of movement do you do? Because movement counts. We discriminate against it, but the body doesn't. But she was very set. She says, I don't exercise. I'm so bad. I'm so lazy. Come to find out, she's doing a yoga class 2 times a week. And again, that's where I have to say, okay, well, would the yoga class count if I were doing it? Because I'm in a thin body. I now realize I'm in a thin privileged body. Every time in my life that I've ever thought I was fat, I was wrong. I was in a thin body. This is the body that I was given. It's changed shape and size throughout the course of my life. But up to this point, I have never been in a body that has been culturally perceived as fat. And I recognize that as a privilege, not because being thin makes me a good person or a bad person, but because I see the way the world treats people in fatter bodies. And it's not okay. It's not right. And so I have to recognize the fact that even on the days that I feel uncomfortable in my body, I'm not getting discriminated against because of it. Right. And so we've got all these cultural things supporting eating disorders. We've got, society saying, yeah, if you're fat, you're bad. Well, then yeah, it's no wonder so many people in our culture are struggling and hurting themselves to become thin.
Absolutely. And hearing and having this external negativity the whole time, well, that's just going to drive them to eat more. To make themselves feel better, isn't it?
Yeah. And to then hate themselves for eating more afterwards. I also think it's a myth that you get to choose the size body that you have. I mean, I have to say, some of the women that I work with who have eating disorders and hardly eat at all are in very fat bodies. We don't really get a say, you know? And now I realize, again, like I said, that I'm in a thin body, but it's not because I worked for it. It's not because it's a combination of genetics, but also just bone structure. And I don't have my mom's body so much as I have more my grandmother's body, but it's still different because it's got a little bit of my mom in there, and like, you don't get a say. My sister is 4 inches taller than me, and just a totally different shape. And I've never, different. She also had an eating disorder. Different times in my life, I've wanted to look like her. I'm fairly confident that throughout her life, she's wanted to look like me. And there was nothing I was ever going to be able to do to look like her, and vice versa. And like I said, we had competing eating disorders, and neither one of us were able to look like the other person, because you don't really get a say in what you look like. So as much as we can sort of step back and say, okay, well, there is no one way to look good, right? Or there is no one version of beautiful. What I think even more importantly than that, because I do believe all bodies are beautiful, but I want to remind the women that I work with that you don't have to feel beautiful to be beautiful. You don't have to feel like you have value to be of value, because we all have days where we're not going to feel it, right? Even me, this far into my recovery, helping other women, I still have days that I wake up and I'm like, I feel like a worthless piece of, arse. I'll say it since you're British. Arse. I feel like a worthless piece of arse. And now I know, okay, I get to feel that way today, but feeling that way doesn't mean it's true. And it doesn't have to impact the way I care for myself and the way I show up in the world. I just don't have to feel good for a day. It's unfortunate. And I don't like those days, but they pass. All feelings pass if you let them. So
yeah, absolutely. And it's having the tools to be allowed to have those feelings and allow them to drift by without actually hooking into them, picking them up.
Right.
And so what are the tools and techniques that you help your clients with to be able to address?
Yeah. Well, I give you tools that teach you how to slow down and have that conversation. I teach you how to get curious about your thoughts, rather than just sort of take them as truth. I talk about, I teach you how to make space for what I call conflicting truths. I think, diet culture really teaches black and white. So good food, bad food, thin, fat, good, bad. And what I teach, because I think where I had some of my biggest struggles was making peace with that gray area. Because the black and white thinking of diet culture leads us to believe, well, if this is true, then this is not that, then this is false, right? And so I talk about conflicting truths that don't negate each other. And I'll give you an example. For example, all bodies are beautiful. Cool. We have that truth right here. I don't feel beautiful today. Okay. Me not feeling beautiful doesn't negate that all bodies are beautiful. And all bodies are beautiful doesn't negate the fact that I'm just not feeling it today. And so we get to make a space for both those things sort of sitting next to each other and coexisting. Again, so then you can make a space for my body is fatter than I want it to be. Okay. And my body is fine, right? Because diet culture says, if your body is fatter than you want it to be, then fix it, because it's not okay. You got to fix it, right? And we can make a space for these two conflicting truths. My body is fatter than I want it to be, and I don't have to change it. Two conflicting truths that don't negate each other. So I help I help the women that I work with identify the mythology that they're accepting of diet culture, that they've just sort of accepted as their own. I help them identify their truth from the truth. You know, again, my truth can be I'm gross, I'm ugly. The truth is, again, all bodies are beautiful. So we have to start to identify these various truths. So I help them identify the truths. I help them identify what rules they're living by. We have food rules. I say food rules are rules that aren't actual rules, but they're rules that we live by. And I help you identify how yours are different from someone else's. I think we very much think like, oh, no, I know how to eat healthy. And we assume that everybody who says they're eating healthy eats the same way. They don't. These are arbitrary rules we've made up that keep us feeling safe. So
actually, yeah, that's a very good point, isn't it? Yeah, no, I eat healthy, but you know, I also eat 4 cream donuts a day as well, but I don't mention that.
Yeah, well, but I mean, it's so interesting because we start to identify, you know, I grew up in the era of low fat, no fat foods. So carbs weren't that scary because they were a low fat food. So then we shifted into this low carb, and I've found that throughout the years, then my fears and anxieties around food don't necessarily align with what's culturally going on around food. And it's interesting because I'll get scared or nervous or feel that anxiety kick in around a food that's very culturally acceptable at the moment, because I was like, well, I always drank. I don't think for a single day in my life, my mom ever gave me anything over skim milk. But so I have never given my kids skim milk. We've gone whole milk whenever I've given them, but I still have this sort of natural like feeling around whole milk, because it's just like I can hear the voice in my head be like, it's just so thick, like it's just so fatty, right? So again, recognizing, okay, that was like my idea of eating healthy growing up was skim milk. Now I recognize that's not necessarily healthy. And in fact, that's not something I want to implement with my children, which is not to say, by the way, just to be really clear, that skim milk is bad, right? It's just, it doesn't have to be one or the other. It can be a preference, as opposed to me believing, oh, I'm eating healthy because I'm drinking skim milk, or, oh, I'm unhealthy because I'm not drinking skim milk. Because you could flip those arguments on their head, right? I could be, well, I'm very healthy because I'm drinking whole milk, and that's very unhealthy, you drinking skim milk. And we just sort of get to realize these rules that we live by are myths. That
I think an example of that would be, I eat healthy because I'll eat fat-free yogurts, but then it's not addressing how much sugar's in that.
Totally. And we've also got to remember that health is more than just nutrients, right? Health is mental well-being. There are so many reasons to eat that actually have nothing to do with hunger. You can eat for comfort. You can eat for celebration. I've eaten out of spite. So there are so many different reasons to eat that if you're only listing the nutrient, breakdown of it, then it's taking a mental toll to keep you from the other foods, right? And so you can't really say that there are healthy foods or unhealthy foods. There are different foods that are appropriate for different people at different times. And so this idea of healthy versus unhealthy, how is even that concept a diet culture concept that's keeping us from feeling good about ourselves, right? And so I'll help you explore that. And
that's what it's all about, isn't it? It's having that, it seems to be an external control that's controlling our happiness.
I think that when we clamp down on these rules, when Ed gets louder, because Ed's never personally, in my experience, my recovery, and I consider myself recovered, is Ed's never gone away. I still hear him. He's still in there. He still has an opinion. And depending on how I'm feeling emotionally, he can be louder or quieter. again, the difference is that now I'm at a point in my life where even when he gets loud, that's to me just an indication of like, okay, Debbie, we need to assess. Are you feeling lonely? Do we need to have a date night with your husband? Do you need a hug from your kids? Do you need to like, take 30 minutes and meditate? There are different tools that I can use because now the ed
it's
voice,
actually, it's breaking that down and, what really is going on here? What is it that I want, what I do want?
Right.
And
so
it's tuning into what that is.
I don't think the voice has to go away. I think we can learn to make friends with it. And then it just becomes one more tool we have for caring for ourselves.
Yeah.
But I think it's hard because again, you've got diet culture telling you that self-care looks a certain way. And I don't know anybody who then feels like they get it right.
Absolutely, because there's so many different external pressures.
There's so many. Yeah. So, but I always compare the image of like the cultural version of what healthy is. I compare it to, I always say, like, if it was personified, it would be a teeny tiny woman in a yoga outfit who is always coming from Pilates, but is never sweaty. And she's always on her way to an important meeting, but she never gets stuck in traffic and she's never late. And she's always perfectly on time.
Life.
And
she's always smiling.
And she's always got a green drink and she's like, she doesn't fart, she doesn't burp, she doesn't do any of those things. And like when you give her a compliment, she responds in the perfect, gracious way without seeming conceited or arrogant or anything. And the truth is that doesn't exist, right? It doesn't exist. We all fart. We all are late sometimes. And, I get like sort of coming back to how does diet culture impact all of us? There's no good way to take a compliment, right? Because if you take it too confidently, you're an arrogant person. But if you deny it, it's like, well, have some confidence, lady. So it's like, there's no good way. So this woman doesn't exist, right? But if we recognize that that's what we've limited ourselves to thinking success looks like, then it opens up, then there's room for us then there's room for us to say, okay, again, me feeling like I'm doing it wrong is because what the illusion of correct is doesn't exist. So I'm always going to feel like I'm doing it wrong. I don't get to feel like I'm doing it right. And there's something really liberating in that, So, yeah.
So Debbie, so you're doing one-to-one coaching.
Mm-hmm.
So you're doing it online?
I do. Everything's been virtual. It's been interesting because I was actually very nervous when the pandemic hit for many, many reasons. But one of the things was I was like, how am I going to do this? Everything's transitioned to virtual. And I have to say, I'm working with women all over the world. Not just all over the country, all over the world. And the reason that I think that that's important to say, again, for people listening is everybody feels this way, right? It's not just you. Even if you're sitting here and you're like, yeah, I know you say that, except for it's just me. No, I'm working with someone in Germany. I'm working with someone in the Netherlands, and I'm working in someone like it's all over. These are different sized women, different backgrounds, different religions, different ethnicities, different, ways of identifying gender wise. These are you. You're special, but that's not why. Everybody feels this way. We all feel the same way. And so it's been interesting because, I was in my little Los Angeles bubble before COVID, and I knew that there were people here, but again, sort of that opening up of like, oh, right. Even though I knew I wasn't the only one who felt this way, now I'm realizing it's all over the world, like it's everywhere. And so, so I do one-on-one coaching, and then I have a private community.
Tell us about that.
So the private community is, honestly, it's a really special place. It's intimate. It's right now there's only about like 15 or 16 women in it. But it started as only 3. So we're growing and we're strong. These are all the diverse women that I'm talking about, from different countries and different backgrounds and different sizes and different colors and all of the things. And we get together regularly and we have these sorts of conversations. And that's that place for you to be able to say, wait a second, she feels the same way I do. We do a lot of, I do a lot of raise your hand if you've ever felt, and then everybody's hand goes up. I think something that's been interesting in the group is, first of all, none of these women have ever met each other in person. Myself included, I haven't met any of these women. They've all started online and are in different parts of the world. There is a real intimacy there. We have brought each other with us on, triggering trips home to families. The group gets messages saying, hey, I imagined holding all of your hands when my mom said, what are you doing for exercise now? Because you look like you've put on some weight, like all of this stuff. So it's really, really intimate. We get together regularly. We do group coaching where we identify the rules that we're living by. We identify the myths, make space for various truths. I think it can be easier to do that when you're working with other people's truths sometimes to start than when you work with your own. But we also get together regularly. I teach within the private community. I teach 3 classes a week that are movement exploration classes. So it started out as an exercise class, but then it sort of shifted into, where do I feel guilt and shame perpetually as I exercise? And where do I think I'm not exercising hard enough? And now we're starting to experiment with joyful movement. And what does joyful movement mean to you? And then what happens if you tell yourself to move for 60 seconds and you want it to be heavy movement or angry movement or bubbly movement? Like, how can we start to feel this movement and identify our own movement bias? The group is perpetually evolving because we're all growing as women in diet culture. We're building up our immunity together. And as we conquer new things, it sort of hits new ground. So I'm so proud of what we're doing in the group. And it's very, very cool. And so that's the group community. And if you're looking to connect with other people, to remind yourself, okay, I know everybody says I'm not the only one who feels this way, but damn, it really feels like I'm the only one who feels this way. This is a great place.
Yeah.
We will lift you up. We will cheer you on. We will hold your hand and remind you that when you don't feel your value, these conflicting truths, right? When you don't feel your value, the group is still very much aware of your value.
Yeah.
And so you get to take that with you wherever you go. And it's been pretty cool.
So you've got the group and then you do the one-to-one.
Mm-hmm. That's okay. That takes up the majority of my time.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
How can people find you, Debbie?
Yeah. So you can check out my website, which is bodyrelationship.com.
Right.
That's got access to me. You can email me if you have any questions about anything that you've heard me talk about today. And I'll give you all of this so that it can, be posted and shared in the show notes. But you can email me at Debbie. I'm going to spell it because there's different ways to spell Debbie. And then I'm going to spell my last name. I'll just tell you the whole email. It's Debbie Saroufim @gmail.com. That's D as in dog, E as in egg, B as in boy, B as in boy, I as in ice, E as in egg, and then Saroufim, S as in Sam, AROU, F as in Frank, I, M as in Mary. Debbie Saroufim @gmail.com. I answer questions. You can find me on Instagram. I'm at bodyrelationship_coach. I answer. This is literally all I want to talk about ever. So if you're like, I don't know, does she want to talk? Yes, I want to talk. Message me. And I want to talk to you. I want to hear your story. It helps. This is very much an ongoing part of my recovery. I don't think recovery is over as much as I think I'm recovered. I think it's an ongoing process, and working with other people is my favorite thing to do. So,
so everybody reach out to Debbie.
Please. And I'm going to give you also, there's, I think that, again, it's one of those weird diseases where we won't get help because we don't think it's bad enough. So what I have for your listeners is an assessment. I know a lot of us know when Ed is talking to us, but a lot of us don't necessarily know when some of the like more culturally acceptable diet culture thoughts pass through our brain. Right. And so I have this little assessment you can look and you can say, how often do I say these things to myself?
Okay, so how do they find that?
That is going to be bodyrelationship.com /detox, because it's going to see if you need a detox from diet culture.
Oh, okay. So there's an assessment to go in there, and then and you're just going to look. Some of these things are going to seem really obvious to you, right? Because some of them you're like, well, yeah, that's my Ed voice. But some of them are going to be less obvious because we're taught to think this way, right? Which is why, again, 1 in 4 diets turns into an eating disorder, but 4 in 4 diets is disordered eating. So they're churning us out to have these thoughts. And then, also we've been thinking this way quite often for such a long time.
We don't even realize.
We're not even aware of that we think that way. So,
absolutely. We don't even realize that we don't realize that it's an autopilot thought versus our own.
Yeah.
And so this will help you take a look and you go, oh, wait, oh, I say that to myself. Oh no. And so that's sort of what that is meant to do. So you can check that out. That's bodyrelationship.com /detox, because you might need a detox from diet culture.
Yeah. Okay. We'll have to check that out. Well, Debbie, thank you so much.
This has been so much fun. Please have me back because I really like talking about this.
Absolutely. You have to come back.
Please. This is really fun. Please, anybody reach out. I want to talk. So.
Yeah. Oh, well, thank you so much for sharing, all of that really relevant information, that a lot of us don't even think about.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me and for introducing me to your community. And please know that wherever you are out there with your relationship with your body and food, you aren't alone. And all feelings, this is something I have to remind myself, all feelings, even the good ones, pass. Right? So you don't have to act on them. Reach out for support. If you talk to someone about it, you're going to be very surprised at how many people feel the same way you do.
Yeah.
So you're not alone out there. Yeah.
Oh, well, thank you, Debbie. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. This was great.
Oh, thank you to everybody for listening. So that's the end of today's episode. And before we go, make sure you subscribe to the podcast on Apple iTunes so you never miss an episode, and let us know what you think and show some love, your favorite podcast, by leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts or Stitcher or iTunes or Google Podcast or wherever you listen. And thank you so much. And I'll look forward to speaking to you in the next episode.